fate of us all, little one.
This task was appointed to you, and if you do not...
you, I'm Tanner Richard Kraft.
I'm Austin Zwiebelman.
I'm Rein.
I'm Joseph Vrenick, and that's really how we're starting this?
I'm Tim M. Sullivan, son of Aragorn.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Lord of the Rings.
I have a ring here. We're talking about the Fellowship of the Ring.
Was that clap in the beginning for Peter Jackson and the whole crew who made this possible?
Yes, actually, Austin. Everyone who made this movie, went to war, basically, to make this movie. We're gonna get right into it. This is obviously a classic movie. An epic. Some might say the last good blockbusters. You know, morons. So, I'm fairly certain most, except one of us, are Lord of the Rings fans. What kind of history do you have of the franchise, and do you remember the first time you saw a Lord of the Rings movie? Vrenick, you seem the most jazzed to do this, so we'll start with you.
Yeah, I am the most jazzed to do this because I was the one that was suggested that we do this.
What? No, you're not. I put this on the schedule without anyone prompting me to.
You're both wrong. It was Joe, but it wasn't Joe V. It was Joe Bovinglow.
Okay, we can agree on that. It was Joe Bovinglow.
Am I a fan of Lord of the Rings? And the first time I saw this, so let me take you back all the way to the year 2001 when I was living out in Olathe, Kansas. I was a wee little lad who had just gotten internet at the time. There was a point in my life when I was a wee 5-year-old lad watching movie trailers on whatever the website Apple had at the time. One of those trailers, whenever I wasn't rewatching the Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone trailer for the billionth time, was Lord of the Rings. I had stumbled upon this because, oh hey, I recognized the font. This is a series of toys that they're trying to promote. This was like a franchise that kind of intrigued my young little mind and was something I really wanted to see. Flash forward a couple years later, I think at this point I'm living out in Troy, Illinois, and I watched this movie for the first time. Watching this movie for the first time was like the equivalent of watching Star Wars for the first time. I had never seen anything like it at the time. It truly captured my imagination. It enthralled me, and I would wind up seeing those movies later on as they came out on DVD. My parents would never take me to see them in the theater for some unknown reasons. I got to rectify that though, and I saw all 3 of them in the theater earlier this year in IMAX, and that was a fun experience that I won't talk about here. And this was also one of those movies that was very popular for its behind-the-scenes stuff. And whenever I would get the DVDs, I would watch those constantly. And it was one of those pillar movies that piqued my interest in filmmaking. So am I a fan of Lord of the Rings? Yes. Was I a fan before? No, because I was infant. Am I a fan of it still to this day? Hell yeah.
Okay, we're going to move on to Austin Zwiebelman, known... he's actually the man that killed Peter Jackson last night in his apartment. The police are on their way to their location right now, Austin, so you better make it quick.
Tanner, those news articles aren't even out yet, and how could I possibly kill Peter Jackson? I'm not in New Zealand. The first time I saw a Lord of the Rings movie, I think I was 8, and I was seeing the 2 towers at AMC West Olive 16 in my hometown. It was really late at night, 10:30. I remember being super excited to get up, be up late and still be out doing things, because that's a thing you do as a kid. Anyway, I fell asleep shortly after it started, and I woke up and I was wondering, why is everybody fighting? What's going on? I was looking at Helm's Deep, the way that a microscopic organism looks at humans. I was so confused. The idea back then was that those movies were too long for my limited child attention span, and they lacked the things that caught my interest going forward into my preteen teenage years, boobs and blood and gore and excessive cursing and stuff. Lord of the Rings as a kid put me to sleep more effectively than Ambien or a punch to the temple. Eventually, around age 18, I became kind of a film buff, and so I decided to give Lord of the Rings another chance. What I experienced was this phenomenon after that called post-prime fanboying. I coined that phrase. Just like how I got into Radiohead right around when they released King of Limbs, I had showed up after the high water mark of quality, just in time to experience the exciting, future installments flop into our laps like a wet fish. I actually gave up on the Hobbit trilogy and didn't see the later 2 movies in the theaters. But I'd be a real idiot not to acknowledge how big of a deal these films are. It's like sports in that way. Like, they're not my favorite thing in the world, but I understand why people love them so much, you know, for film studies reasons. Back to you, Tanner.
All right, I just my pants. So, Rein, Conversely, let's go ahead and hear your history with the Lord of the Rings, and are you a fan?
So my take actually isn't too different from Austin's. I saw it when I was like 8. I only saw Fellowship as a kid. I liked it. Didn't leave much of an impact on me, if I'm being honest. It was like, oh, that's fun. And kind of in one ear out the other sort of deal. And then I rewatched it when I was like 16, 17. Enjoyed it a lot more. But still wasn't like in love with it. It was just like, oh, that's a really solid movie. I mean, I think I saw that in Two Towers, and then just never got around to Return of the King because of. Have you seen the runtime? And then and then I rewatched it again 6 months ago or something like that, and I really, really appreciated it like a lot more that time around. I can get into that later, but yeah, it's really just, it's a movie that's grown on me, and it's just taken me growing up, I guess, to really appreciate the finer aspects of it, which is weird because of like what Joe's saying, so many people like got hooked on it as they were a child. I think a big part of it might be because so much Western fantasy is just like regurgitations of Tolkien's work that it's kind of, even if you like consciously are aware, oh, this is the original
It's the Seinfeld isn't funny effect.
Hey, that's my catchphrase.
Yes.
Well,
yeah,
I'm
basically.
saying the thing.
For me, like the thing that like the first fantasy thing that like got me hooked in was the Elder Scrolls universe. So like whenever I see any fantasy thing, I subconsciously think, oh, this is just an Elder Scrolls ripoff.
Guy who has only seen the Boss Baby watching his second movie. I'm getting a lot of Boss Baby vibes from this. Anyway, Tim, go right ahead and history of the Lord of the Rings. Do you remember watching a Lord of the Rings movie for the first time? Which one was it?
So, much like Austin, I was about 8 years old when the Fellowship of the Ring came out in theaters, and I remember going to see that with my family, and like I remember going into it knowing that like this was gonna be like this big thing, and like that it was like a way longer movie than anything I had ever experienced before. I distinctly remember they didn't even like play trailers before it. They were just like, we got to just go right into it. I watched all 3 movies in theaters when they came out. I remember it was basically like a Christmas tradition in our household for those 3 years. And like, it was one of those things where like, I really enjoyed the movies. Like, I thought they were really cool as a kid, but at the same time, it was just like, man, these movies are really long. I want to go home and play with my new Yu-Gi-Oh cards. So it's definitely like, it's definitely something that I've grown to appreciate more as I've watched them, as I've gotten older. As a kid, it's just such a long thing that it's hard to keep your attention span on it. I rewatched the first one in IMAX, like Joe was saying earlier this year when they were doing the re-release thing. Due to various circumstances, I did not get to see Two Towers or Return of the King in IMAX, unfortunately, but if they do a re-release, I might jump on that. Fortunately, I only got to watch the first one, but even that, like, it was cool to see that again on the big screen. I haven't read the books. I think I listened to the audiobook of the first one on a car trip at one point as a kid. The only Tolkien book that I've actually read was his translation of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight.
What?
At some point, I do want to like eventually read the Lord of the Rings series, but I've also heard that there's just like entire pages of describing a mountain in those.
You're not wrong.
Yeah, it's cool. I'll talk more on the next question. Back to you, Tanner.
So, my experience with Lord of the Rings, I was 14 years old when I saw my first Lord of the Rings movie. I remember now walking in the theater, watching the movie and walking out being like, those 48 frames per second sequences were kind of weird. That's right, my first Lord of the Rings movie was The Hobbit, An Unexpected Journey. I really liked it. I had a lot of fun with that movie. So then I went back and I was like, all right, I should watch the original Lord of the Rings. And then you know what I did? Not that. I didn't watch the original Lord of the Rings. Next year rolls around. Second Hobbit movie, baby. I'm there. Opening night. You know what? I'm a fan. I forgot what it was called. I don't remember anything about it, but I liked it at the time. And I said, all right, this year, I'm gonna go back, watch the Lord of the Rings. And you know what I did? I didn't do that. I probably watched All Dogs Go to Heaven 2 for the 19th time instead. So, year after that, 2014, baby, here we go. What is it? The Hobbit and the Journey of the Battle 5 Armies of the Rise of the Silver Surfer, whatever the it was called. Oh yeah, baby, I'm there. Midnight, let's go. Oh man, I watched it. It was bad, but man, I pretended I loved it. So then I went, okay. Now I'll go back to the Lord of the Rings. And then I watched All Dogs Go to Heaven 2 for the 20th time in my life. 2015 rolls around. And then I go, okay, I'll finally watch The Lord of the Rings. And people say, you have to watch The Lord of the Rings. You like the first Hobbit movie? The Lord of the Rings movies are like 50 times as good as that. Oh, and you gotta watch the extended editions. Little did they know. Telling me that was a mistake because the extended editions of these movies are really bad and have bad pacing. So for the longest time, I thought people were nuts about The Lord of the Rings. I thought the Hobbit movies were better. The Hobbit movies had pacing. Lord of the Rings didn't. Until, I think it was around 2019, I let it slip my deranged opinion that The Hobbit was better than Lord of the Rings movies. And William Shatner came into my home. I don't know why it was him of all people. And he started strangling me and said, no, Tanner, you mustn't. And I said, yes, Shatner. I have been shat upon, and I will now follow your wisdom. So then I watched the normal, not extended, normal versions of The Lord of the Rings. And oh my God, when you chop 50 minutes out of Fellowship of the Ring, man, it gets significantly better. There's way less boring downtime. This movie's 3 hours long, but it's significantly well paced, and we'll get into that in a second. And then I watched Two Towers, I loved it, and I watched Return of the King, and I loved Return of the King. And we'll get into that in a few years. But yeah, that's my experience with the Lord of the Rings franchise. I promise I don't sound like I'm up all the time.
This is a lie.
This is a lie.
That's a fabric.
Yeah,
No,
this is pretty
sometimes-
standard.
Watch the Arthur Christmas podcast last week. I'm way more calm.
He was not.
Yes, I am.
Tanner's mask was more firmly on. He wasn't mask off like he is now.
What were your guys' thoughts upon your latest, I assume, rewatch of Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the Ring? Ring, ring, ring. Ring, ring, ring.
Banana phone.
Tim, I swear to God, I just want to hear about your Fellowship of the Ring thoughts. We're going to start with Rein Conversey.
Man, it's one of those movies. It's kind of really hard to talk about, but
Oh God, it's Raiders of the Lost Ark all over again.
I'll give it a whirl though. Something I really appreciate about Fellowship that I thought was lacking a bit in Two Towers and not as much in Return of the King, but I feel like this grand epic fantasy story really, I feel like that works best when it's sort of blended in with just sort of like light whimsical, just like light whimsy. I don't know why, I feel like those two things together, those two elements together just create the best thing ever. Insert some cool smart guy analogy that'll make me sound like a cool smart guy. Great cast of characters that it's like how many main like supporting characters are this, and like it doesn't feel overstuffed at all. Looks immaculate. Definitely captures just feeling like a whole new fantasy world. Probably the best film to do that. When it came out, I can't think of a film that did that. I was about to say did that as well as Star Wars. There's a few movies that come to mind.
Yeah,
but,
Star Trek 3.
That the Genesis effect has in some way regenerated Captain Spock.
I'll say this is the second best looking fantasy movie ever behind Legend, the Tom Cruise movie. It just captures like when people like envision fantasy. I think this gets the silver, I think, for like capturing on a aesthetic level. It's a kind of a perfect movie. If there is one thing that isn't perfect, the ending, it can only be so perfect of ending when it's only cutting in the middle of a book, but it does it as well as like I think anyone reasonably could, because it does feel like a complete story.
Does better than Dune does.
Definitely probably feels less messy when you have something like Dune to compare it to.
This is only the beginning.
So yeah, great time. Fantastic movie. Arguably probably a perfect movie, many would say, and I'd probably say. Back to you, Tanner.
Rein, I agree. Why am I doing the one does not simply?
No, this is the one does not simply.
One does not simply host a podcast.
Come on, Valeria.
That's a cat.
Rein, I agree that Fellowship of the Ring gets a silver in the aesthetics department. I believe gold goes to Return of the King. No, I'm kidding. I mean, I'm not kidding, but that's not what this podcast is about.
All right.
I get it. You're counting it as one thing. It's
Lord
a
of the
joke.
Rings in general.
It's a joke. This is satire, Your Honor. All right, Austin. Known Lord of the Rings hater. I'm kidding. But what did you think upon rewatching Fellowship of the Ring the first time and also apparently immersing yourself into behind-the-scenes deep lore today?
Yeah, I spent like 5 hours today just watching behind the scenes stuff. So I'm going to try to blister through this question because my territory is question 3. A little tiny preface for people who don't know me personally. I'm an atheist who grew up hating Lord of the Rings, and I married somebody from a very Christian family where everybody loves Lord of the Rings. My husband and brother-in-law can quote this movie top to bottom. It's really cool to watch. I mentioned this because that's why I bought an entire 4K Blu-ray player last Christmas, just so we could watch one thing, just so we could get the 4K Ultimate Collector's Edition that came out. So that's what I was watching last Tuesday, that specific release. Are all of you aware of what they did to the colors for that 4K Blu-ray? Anybody here?
Unfortunately, yes, I am.
They on it, right?
They changed it so it would look more in line with the Hobbit trilogy. They made it gray. They desaturated a lot of stuff. And I figured out a way around this. For any of you at home who has that Steelbook, go into your Blu-ray player settings, take the saturation slider and go all the way. It helps. Meat and potatoes.
Potatoes. Boil them, mash them, stick them in a stew.
I watched the theatrical version because, like Tanner said, Fellowship is a movie that really doesn't benefit from the extra runtime. I do disagree, though. I think that Two Towers and Return of the King have okay extended editions, but in Fellowship, you have just scenes I cannot justify, like Sean Beam getting really, so worked up about the ring at the Fellowship meeting that Gandalf has to black out the sky. That whole thing feels out of place. A lot of scenes like that. And it always blows me away how much I want to go in and, shred this movie, call it a bunch of dumb idiots LARPing, like it's an expensive D&D campaign, but every single time I go back and watch The Fellowship, it's as timeless and awesome as it always was. If anything, internet memes have made this movie even stronger than it used to be. Every time I see Sean Beam do his hand like this, almost every frame of Gandalf, the memes just made it better.
What about second breakfast?
My general rewatch only produced a couple of notes from the Highcheck siblings who were both there, and their observations matter more than anything I can say because they've seen this movie 1,000 times. First time was Leighton saying that Gandalf never really apologizes for being late when Frodo wakes up, in Elrond's palace. He never apologizes. And the other one was that Sid said on that particular copy that Nazguls could have had better blacked out faces. But we don't know because we turned the saturation all the way up. I'm mostly excited to talk about this movie and individual scenes and production notes going forward, but I can't sum up why I like it so much. Going back to the thing Rein said about Legend, there was this quote from Peter Jackson that came out last year, I think, 2020 interview. He said he wanted the historical authenticity of Braveheart and a little of the visual magic of Ridley Scott's Legend, and the movie he chose to be the antithesis of Lord of the Rings was Willow.
I'm sorry. I just want to make, did you say historical authenticity of Braveheart?
Yeah.
The movie that is famous for being historically inauthentic?
Well, I'm just reading a quote. Don't take it up with me. Take it up with the big man.
Sorry, I just wanted... With God? Yo, dog. I know we don't talk much, but...
The movie that he chose to trash
with lightning
as the anti-Lord of the Rings. He said he didn't want the mumbo-jumbo of the movie Willow, which is weird because I actually did like Willow as a kid.
Willow rocks! What the hell is this guy's deal?
The crew created a movie with rules that make sense, legends that are awesome, and stakes that matter. Back to you, Tanner.
All right, I would agree 100%. So, moving on, Joe Vrenick, we're going to skip right past you. We'll save you for last. Tim M. Sullivan, what do you think of Fellowship of the Ring?
I think I would agree with basically Rein's sentiment that it's basically a perfect movie. I don't think I would necessarily say it's one of my favorites, but I can't not see it for what it is, which is just such a well-made film. I think it was made at the perfect time too, where it was still a largely real movie. It was largely filmed on sets. The CGI didn't feel like it was more than necessary. Like it felt like it was there where it needed to be. It's good looking CGI for its day, and even for today. Like it looks dated a little bit, but it doesn't look bad.
Honestly, it looks better than maybe 50% of movies coming out today. Looks better than Snake Eyes.
The purple stuff in Hawkeye.
Oh God,
that recently.
Yeah, that's pretty recent. That looked like ass. Sorry, Tim. Go ahead.
My purple stuff's better.
Probably. I don't watch Marvel. Anyway, I honestly think it looks like it looks good even for today. Like it holds up surprisingly well for being 20 years old. It's such a great spectacle of a film. All of the characters feel very well fleshed out. There's something to appreciate with all of them. Now I'm going to use this soapbox to talk about a film called Mandy. So, this movie is tangentially responsible for that existing because in 2010, Elijah Wood co-founded a company called SpectreVision, and through that company, off Tanner. Anyway,
no, this is incredible. This is incredible. This is impressive.
Yeah. I'm in love.
Yeah. So through SpectreVision, they were able to make some very like surrealist kind of horror type films, and Elijah Wood found this guy Panos Cosmatos' film Beyond the Black Rainbow is just like, yo, this film rocks. Let's fund this dude's passion project. So thank you, Lord of the Rings, for giving us Mandy. Back to you, Tanner.
Incredible, just incredible.
God bless.
Rein was that guy in Joe V's and I Shang-Chi screening when someone tried to applaud at the Marvel logo, and then some guy went, "Shut up!"
I would be that guy.
True story. Anyway, now that everyone that matters talked, we're going to move on to our next question. I'm just kidding. Joe Vrenick, what do you think of Fellowship of the Ring upon your latest rewatch?
So I'm going to add to Tim's thing here real quick. Lord of the Rings, yeah, it's responsible for Mandy. However, it's also responsible for two movies. It's responsible for A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night, and it's also responsible for The Greasy Strangler. Yeah. I just wanted to throw that out there because Elijah Wood produced both of them.
It's also responsible for Tanner's favorite film, Color Out of Space.
No.
Exactly. So, now Austin has to play a clip of The Greasy Strangler.
No.
Yeah. You're officially the world's biggest bull and horse artist.
To my actual thoughts of the movie, I'm going to start by quoting Lindsay Ellis because it kind of actually reflects my thoughts on the movie. The Lord of the Rings, the Fellowship of the Ring specifically, is a movie so goddamn good it makes me angry. Like, I do not understand what kind of black magic Peter Jackson had to go and like conjure up to get this movie to be as perfect as it is. But my God, it's like you watch like the grand scale of this and just how perfect it's pacing. To quote Tanner Richard Kraft, it's Grandoise scale. Brought Grandoise back. It's big bombastic performances. The insanity that had to go into this movie to make it as perfect as it is. This movie had to be perfect, otherwise it was just going to sink the careers of literally everybody involved with this movie. My God, the visual effects of this movie are incredible. This is one of those movies where it's like if you watch all of Peter Jackson's movies prior to this, you just see like the natural progression of this guy. Start at like Bad Taste, Meet the Feebles, and then Dead Alive, and you're like, man, these are some really creative visual effects for like no budget horror movies out in New Zealand. What happens when we give this guy a budget? He makes The Frighteners. What if we give him an even bigger budget and like 2 more movies? He makes one of the most perfect visual effects movies ever made because that man has constantly shown that he knows how to use visual effects. The practicals in this are insane, but then he adds in computer technology, which was kind of in its infancy at the time still. So you're getting like all of these giant like landscapes, these creatures that could not be possible through practical effects just being brought to life and just perfected in one movie. Sure, there's wonky effects, but you know what? Compare all of the wonky effects in this movie to like other movies from 2001. Compare it to Harry Potter. Compare it to I don't know. This wasn't 2001. Lost in Space. Compare it to a lot of movies nowadays.
Compared to Spawn 1997.
compare this. I'm not going to compare this to anything else. Continuing on, the pacing of this movie might be like the best pacing in any major blockbuster I've ever seen in my life. This is efficient storytelling where it sets up the stakes of the ring. You know why this thing is important. You know why people are after it. And now you're just moving forward. And this movie just keeps moving forward. It does not stop for anything. I mean, yeah, there's exposition dumps, but it just does not stop. This is a non-stop, we're gonna keep moving movie, and it's great at that. My God, the performances in this are on like this insane like level where it's like not too over the top to where this is making the world of this seem far too goofy, but it's also not too laid back to where nobody's taking this seriously at all. It's like this perfect fever pitch of like taking it seriously but also having fun with it. The best example of this is the Oscar-nominated performance in this movie, and it's the only time it got nominated for an acting role this trilogy, Ian Dan McKellen as Gandalf.
That is Sir Ian Dan McKellen to you?
Sir Ian Dan McKellen. There we go. If you need somebody to like perfectly bring you into this world, it is through that man's performance, because he just lives this performance. This is all, it just seems natural to him. This man gets some of the most iconic lines ever, and it's just because he delivers it so naturally.
You shall not pass!
My favorite one, and this is going to be like my one joke for this podcast, I believe. He's yelling at Bilbo Baggins, and he goes, "Bilbo Baggins! Do not take me for some conjurer of cheap trick. Just ask the band's manager. They'll play for cheap."
God. This movie is the meme. This movie's the meme blueprint for real. Everyone talks about the Spider-Man Raimi movies. Nah, this is the meme trilogy.
Yeah, watching this in the theater earlier this year, it was just like, oh yeah, that's a meme. Oh yeah, that's a meme. Oh yeah, that's a meme.
Anyway, to wrap my thoughts on this up, because I could probably talk about this movie all day, everything is perfect. The score in this movie is perfect. So many iconic motifs that are used as memes, but also they're just like perfectly utilized in this. Everything has a theme. Everything has a purpose. What a perfect movie. I'm at a loss for words, and I think I passed a kidney stone because my side hurts. Anyway, back to you, Tanner.
All right, so I'm going to go against the grain here. This is not a perfect movie. I think it has some pacing. I think it has a little bit of pacing issues in the second act. I think you could maybe shave off 5 minutes and it'd be a perfect movie then. But that's really the nittiest of nitpicks for me. And really a 3-hour movie, it's hard for any movie to have good pacing at that length. And the fact that it gets so close is impressive in of itself. Beyond that, I mean, yeah, you guys already said everything. There's really nothing left for me to say other than I think Austin and I said this before the movie recording started. This is a movie about dudes rock. You know, a bunch of dudes hanging out, they're having a good time, they're on a journey.
Dudes rock, baby.
Excellent!
Dude, if you watch the special features, they talk about how when Kate Blanchett or Liv Tyler would show up, because they weren't there as much as everybody else, which was all dudes, everyone would behave completely differently on set because there was a girl there. Like they were film school students, just like, girl? And it's just like, oh, it's dudes rock energy, it's nuts.
It was a boys' movie, and she came in and sort of gave us that element, that female touch. And
but yeah, it's such a great movie about dudes hanging out. They're being dudes. Frodo is like the doodliest dude that ever dude. Let me tell you, my review of this movie on Letterboxd was plain and simple. This happened to my buddy Frodo, because simply put, it did. All right, one does not simply go into Mordor. Frodo did. Yeah, it's such a great movie. A little bit of pacing problems in the second act, and honestly, the way it ends is like, it's not even so much that it's incomplete, it just feels really sudden. It's just kind of like, I deadass like zoned out for like 20 seconds, and next thing I know, I saw executive producer Harvey Weinstein. That's what snapped me back. I went, hey, wait a minute. I know that name. Oh no. So, you know, it's really such a good, fun movie. All the performances are really on point, and it's all these actors giving it their all very seriously. Like, there's not a hint of irony in any of this. It's all very sincere. I love the MCU, but sometimes they're a little bit too winking at the audience, but there's not a wink in this movie at all. Imagine making this nowadays. Imagine being a multi-billion-dollar company that is mostly known for the online shopping retail space and deciding, hey, I see that Game of Thrones show on HBO. I want that. So you wind up unilaterally buying the rights to Lord of the Rings, something that has already been adapted perfectly, and you are not going to a top. Hi, I'm Jeff Bezos. Yeah, really, anything more I want to say will pretty much be covered by question 3. So here's a fun thing. This movie has a lot of behind-the-scenes stories, footage. We probably know more about the making of this movie and its sequels than maybe any other movies in history. It's really extensive and really impressive, and is honestly a very valuable educational resource if you want to know what it's like to make a big budget. Like, it's these movies and then The Director and The Jedi is like the behind-the-scenes footage for that, and then the documentary about the making of The Last Jedi. If you want to know how these people make these big-budget studio movies, those are 2 fantastic resources. But what is like maybe one element of the production or with the story elements, like something like that, just something that really, we're all filmmakers here, so what's something that really impresses you on that level? Austin, I know you're raring to go here, so I'll let you go first.
I want to say a shout out to those people who didn't die during production, but they suffered fates worse than death. The crew who had to spend a week wiring 1 million fake oak leaves onto a tree that's hanging out outside of Bag End. The 2 chainmail technicians who spent 18 months putting rings together at a table to make all the chainmail armor in this movie. And of course, all the stuntmen who John Rhys Davies hit with an axe. Apparently, John Rhys Davies doesn't like rehearsing stunts, so instead he opts to just sort of briefly talk to the stuntmen and then dust them full contact with his axe when they come at him.
What a king.
John Rhys Davies is bomb.
All right, the forced perspective, using that's awesome. Like,
dude, that was mine.
I got it before you guys could. Just look at like a behind the scenes filming of like basically any of the scenes in the Shire between Frodo and Gandalf. Look at like how many plates they had to spend just to like get that scene to work. Because it's not like just like one static shot of the 2 of them talking. Like this, the camera is on a dolly track, panning around. How they do that, it's awe-inspiring.
One of the ways that the big breakthroughs for this was they had moving camera force perspective shots where they did a motion control dolly and then they'd hook up like the table of the small guy or sometimes the big guy onto a separate counter moving motion control dolly to achieve the perspective like where it's all kind of supposed to be in the same place with the weird scale achieved. That's how they did that. It was nuts!
The scene where Frodo puts on the ring for the first time and we see what he sees, that still looks super, super duper cool to this day. And that's like mostly done with computers and it's really impressive CG work. Frederick, what's something cool?
Can we talk about the balls on Peter Jackson and everybody involved with the marketing team? This is damn balls on a filmmaker, because one of the big trailers for this movie is the announcement trailer. It just comes in. It's like the CGI like red background of the ring, and they're doing the One Ring speech, and there's like an epic choir building up in the background. Somebody catches the ring, then cut to footage from like all 3 of the movies, and this was back in like 1999, 2000 maybe. And it's like, this Christmas, the most extraordinary event, the most extraordinary story will come to life. And then it cuts to Lord of the Rings. And then it's that big shot of the Fellowship, and they're walking across the screen, and it's Fellowship of the Ring, Christmas 2001, 2 Towers, Christmas 2002, The Return of the King, Christmas 2003. Here's the cast. Get hyped. The confidence that they had in this movie was insane. They felt like they had something special on their hands, and it just so happened to be that they were correct. I am so happy that this was special and that it's had like the impact on film that it had, because if this movie did not do as well, if it was not the masterpiece that this was, and was like an infamous disaster like the previous year, also New Line Cinema, the Dungeons and Dragons movie, if it ended up like that, this would just be a very hilarious piece of marketing, because there's no way if this movie bombed that they were going to make those other movies.
Tim, something cool, go.
I guess I'll just kind of talk about a shot that always just sticks out to me, which is just like the moth flying up onto the tower and going into Gandalf's hand and then flying out. Like I think that that's just a really interesting visual shot, just like following the moth and gliding around.
All right, Austin, I think you have carte blanche now. I've said everything. We have all said everything. Go nuts.
So there's this funny scene in the making of like DVD features where Peter Jackson is like real hyped up and confident, and he's talking about Gollum and the CGI they're using to make Gollum. And he's like, yeah, I think we can have better CGI than Digital Domain or ILM. And the point of reference he's using against Gollum for ILM is Jar Jar Binks. He's just so trying to
Okay,
be
that's
Jar
so unfair.
Jar
That was
Binks.
the first one.
That Gollum is going to be better than Jar Jar Binks, just in terms of his realism and his lip sync and everything else, you know. I mean,
Okay, so did you guys actually know how Weta is made? Just a little fun fact, how Weta came about. So Peter Jackson was working on Heavenly Creatures, a movie about lesbians that Joe for some reason didn't mention. Curious. But one of his like Kiwi friends came up to him and was just like, hey, we could do this cheaper. And they just bought all this like computer equipment. They bought like one silicon graphics machine and a film scanner, and they're just like, right then. And they just made Weta. It's so stupid.
You know what? The similar of Bomb Squad Productions being created is fairly identical. I just came up to Austin and was like, I got a computer.
Joe, were you going to say something?
Can I bring up one point as to why I did not bring up Heavenly Creatures? I brought it up because, one, that's the Peter Jackson movie that I do like, but I've not seen as much, and also I don't remember that many visual effects in it, so I just skipped to The Frighteners. I have to clear that up.
Well, The Frighteners is an awesome CGI like masterpiece for the time, but there's like these stone people who move in Heavenly Creatures. Love that movie.
I need to rewatch it.
Apparently, like all the orcs, like all their armors were just like handmade. Each piece of armor is like unique, like in some slight way. Like they didn't just mass produce it, even for like all these extras.
Another thing that kind of adds to that, how they have all these unique orcs. Back then, somebody created this program called Massive that you hear about, where you see those big CG shots of all the people moving. There's no way to hand animate that without it taking 1 billion years. You'd have to just use a whole country to hand animate that. So what they did was they made this program called Massive that is supposed to like do crowd AI, which was like in its infancy at the time, so that all these like creatures in the shots that are moving at each other are like doing behavior on their own, and all you have to do is just drop them in. It's like that one video game people upload YouTube videos of, Epic Battle Simulator, but really early on. Oh, there's this funny little thing you can achieve when you're watching the special features. I think it's it's a couple of them combined, but Lothlorien was like the most difficult like miniature they had to make in the whole trilogy, apparently, because they had these like 8 26-foot tall trees and all this detail. And if you watch through the whole thing, like all these special features, you can actually see the Strike Master destroying that set. So it's like the most immaculate thing they ever had to put into production and make real. And there's just this one shot you could get to of just a bulldozer destroying that just crashing it to the ground. It's kind of nice. Shot of the Elvish ruins on the hill, by the way. The helicopter pilot, or the person operating the camera, they actually zoomed in a way where they couldn't track the top of the hill at the time. So what they had to do, because they were like, what are we gonna do? We can't get it tracked. We can't put the ruins up there. They just replaced the whole hill. They just put the whole hill, made it fake. It's a cool solution. They almost needed a third pass of like scale stuff. Dwarves, right? They're not as tall as hobbits, but they're not as tall as people. So they were thinking, oh, we're gonna need his own special category. But dig this, John Rhys Davies is 6'1". So when you shoot him at hobbit scale, he's the perfect height. Elijah Wood's like 5'9". He was exactly where he needed to be, and they just shot him at hobbit scale. It's beautiful. Oh, Viggo Mortensen's son convinced him to be in this. So they casted this one guy, Stuart Townsend, who is best known for being Dorian Gray in the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. And then they got to filming and they're like, oh, this guy's too young. We can't do this. So they were already filming. They needed Aragorn like now, dude. So they call up Viggo Mortensen and they're like, hey, if you could tell us by this afternoon if you want to be in a Lord of the Rings movie, that would be sweet. And then Viggo Mortensen was like, I've never heard of Lord of the Rings. This is dumb. And then his son was like, did you say Lord of the Rings? And next thing you know, he's Aragorn.
You know what? The fact that he was convinced by his son is proof that dads rock, baby!
I can't follow that. That's perfect.
Okay. Well, thank you, Austin. That was actually beautiful. My quiet hours ended 30 minutes ago, so I might regret what I just did, but it was so worth it. I took on this risk. Let's get into our just quick final thoughts on the movie. I don't have a trivia corner today. One, that last question was basically any of the relevant trivia I'd bring up anyway. And two, all three of these movies are so massive. I keep half jokingly, half seriously suggesting we're just going to do a fourth Lord of the Rings podcast in 3 years about the making of the movies. I don't know if we'll actually do that. It's just kind of a joke. But either way, we're skipping straight into our final thoughts on this movie. So, Joe Brennick, let me let you go first.
All right. I've said pretty much everything I have to say about this, or at least as far as coherent thoughts go. I think this movie's perfect. I even like the extended version of this. I think you all are crazy. I just think it adds more to this world that I really love being in. I had to throw that in there because you guys were poo-pooing all over it this entire podcast.
Because we're right and you're wrong. This isn't an opinion. It's an objective fact.
Screw you. If anything, I actually dislike the extended version of Two Towers, which one of you said was good. So.
That was me.
Him. I also think that one's bad.
But yeah, no. Perfect movie. If you've not seen it, what the are you doing? Stop watching this.
No, don't stop watching this. Hold on. No, finish watching this. Don't listen to him.
Finish watching this. You're almost at the end. Go watch this as soon as you're done. Why are you watching this if you haven't seen it? Watch it. It's perfect. I love it. Bam. Go. Whoever's next.
Imagine we get a comment that's like, spoilers? Just imagine that. Like,
if
bro,
we do,
the book's 80 years old, dude. This is your own damn fault.
It really is.
All right, Tim, final thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, it basically covered it. It's just such a grand, epic scale of a movie. It's a perfect classic. It's basically the quintessential fantasy film. Go watch it.
All right, Rein, final thoughts.
Movie good.
All right, Austin Zwiebelman, final thoughts?
I guess I like it now. I don't know. It's okay.
I guess. God. All
Sounds
right,
so
really,
begrudging about it.
I don't know what more I can say. It's really just such a fantastic, awesome movie. It's in my top 10 for the year it came out. I think number 9. Ocean's 11 is right behind it. I don't know what's in front of it for that year. It's a really good year for movies, though. It's just such a great, awesome movie. If you haven't seen it, weird, but go ahead and check it out. Sometimes it takes people a while to get to things. And if you have seen it, go watch it again. Because you know what? This is a movie about dudes rock.
You know why it's called The Fellowship of the Ring?
Why?
It's a lot of fellows.
Yeah, a bunch of fellows. But a lot of fellows being like, party rocking in the house tonight. Anyway, it's all about fellows, dudes, they all rock. And you know who else rocks? You do for watching / listening to this podcast. Thank you oh so very much for joining us. If you're listening to this podcast, please go ahead, leave a review below. Any of the audio platforms are on. It will help boost us in the algorithm. If you're watching the Spotify video version, because it's uncensored. If you're watching the YouTube version, that entire string is going to sound like nonsense because it's all bloop. But if you're watching on YouTube, thank you very much. We've been growing a lot on YouTube lately, which we're very appreciative of. Go ahead and go down to the comment section below. Are you a fan of Lord of the Rings? Is this one your favorite? What's your favorite Lord of the Rings movie? Are you excited to hear us cover the Two Towers a year from now, which we will be doing? And finally, should we render the podcast in 48 frames per second in honor of The Hobbit, The Unexpected Journey? The answer is no, we're not doing that.
Austin will kill you if we do this.
All we would have to do is hit the frame rate button. It's easy, right? Editing is magic. You can do anything.
Austin's poor face.
My media cache.
And while you're down there, hit the like button so we know how much you like us. Hit the subscribe button so we know how much you love us. And hit the bell icon so you know exactly when we upload new videos. Thank you so very much for watching. Tune in next time when we...
What are we...
No, hold on. Actually, hold on.
I hope this isn't a bit.
It's a bit.
No, we're finishing now.
Oh, no.
I woke you up?
Oh, no. Oh, my God, are you kidding? Oh, my God. Oh, gee.
Yeah, no,
Real life disasters.
Okay.
Oh yeah, it's 11:30 where you guys are.
Oh my God.
Actually, don't tune in next week. This is the last Bomb Squad podcast ever. I'm canceling it. Bye.